So the Oklahoma high school football playoffs start this week. It is an exciting time in the state of Oklahoma, and it's even more exciting because in Class 6A, for the first time, certainly since Class 6A broke into two divisions, and probably for the first time that I know, I'm not native Oklahoman, and neither is my guest, but in Class 6A, 6 teams from each district will make the playoffs instead of the traditional 4, which allows certain programs that wouldn't otherwise be in the playoffs an opportunity to be in the playoffs. And it just so happens that my adopted hometown of Lawton, the Lawton Wolverines, are hosting the Bartlesville Bruins, and who better to have on than the radio voice of the Bartlesville Bruins, Mr. Evan Fahrbach. Evan, appreciate you doing this, buddy. How are you doing up there in Northeast?
Glenn, yeah, we're good. Everything's good. I appreciate you having me on. I think I got to do this 3 or 4 years ago, sometime when we were just talking about thanks to Northeast Oklahoma teams. So yeah, it's nice that Bartlesville's back in the postseason. And yeah, excited to talk about it.
So that was a program that felt like it was building some momentum, and this year, they finished 5th in that district, and this year, Oklahoma Secondary School Athletic Association, the OSSAA, allows 6 teams instead of the traditional 4 to make the playoffs in 6A1 and 6A2. The number 1 seed will have a bye. I believe the number 2 seed will also have a bye, and then and so the 4 and the 5 are playing. The 3 and the 6 are playing. So Bartlesville comes down here to play Lawton. I mean, what does that mean to a community like Bartlesville, the fact that they are able to play a playoff game again? Because outside of the 2020 COVID year, it's kind of been up and down sledding for the Bruins for a few years now.
Yeah, the last time Bartlesville made the playoffs was in the 2015 season when that team that had A.J. Parker, who's the current defensive back on the Detroit Lions, and then A.J. Archambault, who was a pitcher at Oral Roberts. They had a couple, Division I athletes on that team, along with some other guys that made that run, beat Bixby in the regular season, and they lost to Bixby in the 6A2 semis. That was the last time Bartlesville's been to the playoffs of their own accord outside of that 2020 season that you mentioned. So it means a lot. They've been in this spot a few times. I didn't look it up, but I bet it's 2 times since then, maybe 3. They've been 5th in the district. So just on the outside looking in as far as making the playoffs since that 2015 season. So it was nice that, wins over U.S. Grant and Putnam City West kind of assured them a spot pretty early in the district season. So you had an idea that they were in all likelihood going to go to the playoffs, and it was just a matter of seeding. And there's probably arguments that are legitimate on both sides of it, right? Like I'm excited that the Bruins are back into the playoffs. I think it's good for the program. I think it's good for interest in high school football in a community like this. It's just like when, Major League Baseball or the NFL widens their playoff scope, right? You dilute it a little bit. Certainly, I think that's true. But at the same time, you engage more fan bases, and in this case, communities than you would normally. Because if this had been last year, the Bruins wouldn't be in the playoffs. They would have been just on the barely outside after having lost to Sand Springs in overtime. That was kind of the battle for a 4 seed in the East half of 6A2. Sandites won that one at Custer Stadium by a touchdown in overtime. That was what kind of kept Bartlesville from that 4 spot. So before, the Bruins wouldn't have even been in the postseason, but now they have a chance to get in. So excited for that. I think that there's arguments on both sides for it, but I like that the top 2 seeds get buys. I think that that's really going to kind of balance that out. It gives you a reason if you're Stillwater or Choctaw, Deer Creek, or Muskogee, that you've earned yourself something. You're not on the same footing as the 6th team in the district. So I think it's still pretty fair and still has a ability to keep some communities like ours and like Lawton's engaged.
Completely agree. It really reminds me of, I guess, was that like 2011 when the NCAA tournament introduced the first four, and then we immediately saw VCU make a run. We've seen your boys, the Wichita State Shockers, make the first four a few times and kind of propel that, into the tournament. And I'm really excited. I don't know for sure that I will be at that game. There are other games locally that, teams that'll be hosting, but I'm really excited because this is a matchup we don't normally get to see. Lawton normally doesn't host teams from, that part of the state. And you've got a matchup of some really good athletes. I've only done a little bit of research on him, but PJ Wallace is a guy I feel like that people have talked a lot about. What makes him so special, Evan?
Yeah, he's a sophomore, big, strong guy. Man, when you stand next to him, he doesn't really look or have the presence of a sophomore. Played a decent amount as a freshman, as a backup running back, and as a linebacker and outside rusher a year ago. But this year, he kind of was battling with another junior for that starting tailback spot. And man, Bartlesville's offensive line has been solid, and he's just been tremendous. I mean, he's really big, really physical, and you combine that with his ability to make guys miss in the open field, and you've got a pretty good combination for a 6'2" running back. He's just a sophomore, and I think that Harry Wright, Bartlesville's head coach, has been nothing but pleased with what he's done all season long. He's kind of been what makes the Bruins tick. They've leaned on him pretty much all season long, and when they're at their best, they're running the ball really effectively with him, and he's taking care of it. He's had a 98-yard touchdown run on the ground. He had an 86-yard screen catch for a touchdown when the Bruins actually had a lead on the road at then undefeated Muskogee a couple weeks ago in the first half. So he's had some really good moments. He makes guys miss in the open field, and he always finds an ability to get an extra yard or two when there's nothing there. It's just the same thing you hear about all good running backs. He's able to make guys miss in the open field and create something out of nothing. And he has been Bartlesville's offense, or has been the key cog in Bartlesville's offense all season long.
Yeah, and I think that's another reason why this expansion is a good idea, just because that there are really good players in 6'1" and 6'2", especially, that don't really get the pub of the players that play at the big time suburban high schools. And was just flipping through the Vite Pigskin preview again, and the number of starters that returned for Bartlesville from last year's team is absurd. I mean, they've returned almost everyone back, and I think you've seen programs around the state this year really capitalize on younger players, and Lawton is one of those as well. They had 3 kids as freshmen who played a lot, if not started, most of the games last year. Junior Brock on the offensive and defensive lines, Pene Vicenote playing kind of a wide receiver and then kind of a hybrid linebacker, defensive back role, and then Nate Jones, who has crossed the 1,000-yard rushing mark, is their leading rusher for a second straight year, is just a sophomore. But you and I were talking before we recorded, the guy in Lawton that everyone's talking about, at least in North and Central Lawton, for the Wolverines is Tyron Amaker, and this is a guy that's got multiple D2 offers, and then probably going to get some possible walk-on looks from D1 schools. Watched him against Putnam City Original make one of the best catches I've ever seen a high school football player make, and he and the quarterback Devarius Hardy have. It's one of those kind of cheesy, almost Colt McCoy, Jordan Shipley stories where it's like no one can talk about them without mentioning, did you know they've been best friends since second grade and they've always played since second grade? You can tell, though, because there's almost telepathy there. I literally saw a play where Devarius just kind of threw it up, and most quarterback coaches would tell you, don't do that. And Tyron just kind of comes out of nowhere and makes the play. I think between him, PJ Wallace, and some of the other guys that Bartlesville has, I think this is going to be a really explosive game potentially. What has kind of been Bartlesville's MO like offensively? Are they kind of more of a running, kind of grinded out team? Do they spread it around? What can people kind of expect from Bruins on Friday night?
Yeah, I think that they're at their best when they're running the football with PJ. As I said, they kind of run their offense through him, but they're not afraid to take shots, and that's been something that's propelled them to stay in some ball games this year. That's one thing that I think people don't realize from looking at the record or you kind of just cursory kind of looking at district standings. Bartlesville was within 6 points of Stillwater with less than a minute to play in the second quarter. The Bruins had the ball down 3 to begin the third quarter against Muskogee, and they led virtually the entire half against Booker T. Washington in the first half as well. Now, the second halves were nothing to write home about for BHS in any of those games. They ended up kind of having a lot of turnover issues and, for lack of a better word, falling apart a little bit down the stretch against those teams. They're probably a little overmatched against the top 3 teams in the district. And then against Sand Springs, played a really poor first half, got down 22 and actually scored 22 unanswered in the final 14 minutes of that game to force overtime before the Sand Knights ended up winning it in the extra period. So I think internally, Bartlesville believes that it has a team that can compete with most in the state. And they do that through PJ Wallace, as you mentioned, on the ground. He's a guy that's, gotten more than 100 yards rushing, I think, in 5 of his last 6 games. And the one where he didn't was kind of a circumstantial type of deal. For the most part, when he's gotten 25, 30 carries a ball game, which has been more often than not, he's gotten his 100 yards. He's averaging about 6 yards a pop. He can catch it a little bit. They use him in the screen game some, but they'll take some shots. And they've got a sophomore quarterback, and Nate Neal started a game at the end of last year when Simeon Gilkey got hurt. You mentioned him earlier, and he did really well in the game he started last year, and that's kind of propelled him to this season. He's had a propensity for some turnovers this season. He's thrown some interceptions. He had a few against Muskogee. He had a couple last week in the win over Tahlequah. He threw a few against the Stillwater as well. But they'll take some shots. They're not afraid of doing that, certainly, right? They use a lot of RPO action. They've got another sophomore, Jamie Nico, who's the Bruins' leading wide receiver. And those are kind of the triplets. And they're all 3 sophomores. They're all from that same class. And then they have another sophomore, Noah Darnell, who'll get involved offensively, another wide receiver. He had a kick return for a touchdown a couple of weeks ago. Actually, it was against Sand Springs. And then you've got a senior, Caden Brown, who's probably the second best wideout outside of Nico as far as the numbers go on the season. So a lot of young guys, a lot like Lawton, and a lot like a few of the other guys in the state. And you mentioned Bartlesville gets a chance to showcase some of those guys, to get some of those guys experience for what they hope is going to be a run deeper into the playoffs in a few years. They get a little bit of a taste of it on the road against the Wolverines on Friday.
Yeah, and you and your crew will be coming down to Cameron Stadium, and feel free before the game if you want to holler at me. We can grab lunch or dinner or something. I did just want to point out, this is that Oklahoma State education for you folks, that journalism school education, propensity and discursory, I believe, used in the last 5 minutes by Mr. Evan Fahrbach.
Hopefully I used it right. I don't know.
We'll let Ray Murray be the judge of that.
Is the Cameron Stadium press box the same as it was in 2014? That was one of the main questions.
Almost certainly.
I figured that was probably the case. But yeah, Bartlesville played a playoff game down there the year prior to their run in 2015. They lost to Lawton in the first round. That was the first year I was here in Bartlesville. And then it was a kind of similar type of deal. Most of those dudes I mentioned earlier on that 2015 team were juniors then, and then they made that pretty decent run when they were seniors. I think Archambault was actually a sophomore that year. But AJ Parker and Colton Penrod, who were 2 kind of well-known names in 6A2 football that year, they were juniors when they lost to Lawton on the road in 2014 in a game that was close for a while. I think the Wolverines pulled away in the second half from what I remember. And that was the last time these 2 schools met. And it was also at Cameron. I guess that would have been 8 years ago now. So, it'll be kind of fun to relive that one. And you hope it's going to start what, is a similar type of run for Bartlesville in 2023 going on forward.
Right. Yeah. And I'm trying to think, I'm pretty sure that first year, that was also the first year that they broke 6A1 or 6A into
It was.
two divisions, and I believe that was a year that Lawton High made a run all the way to the state title game. I believe it was 14 and 16. Yeah, Parker was a guy that I remember. He was at K-State, not correct? Yeah, I remember you retweeting or posting some stuff about him. And honestly, Bartlesville, that's a program in an area that I don't know. I kind of wonder why it hasn't been better at times, because I mean, I've been to Bartlesville multiple times. It's a nice area, and I think that just speaks to the Tulsa suburbs, that when you have this, and I'm not saying that everyone is like this, but you have this notion of kind of the helicopter parent that, like, well, I want my kid to get a scholarship, so I want to live in a good area, go to a good school, play for a good program. You have a lot to choose from in Tulsa, but I kind of a little anecdote was, I remember, I think the last time I saw Bartlesville play was when I was working with Pioneer Media when I was in college covering Stillwater High, and they played at Bartlesville. This was probably a year or two before you got there, but I believe the name was Slade Nordic, who I think in 2012, I might have missed that game, but in 2012 against Stillwater ran for like 300 yards, and Ty told me about it. Our mutual friend compatriot of yours up there in Bartlesville, Ty Loftus, told me that he goes, "Yeah, man, they give up 300 yards." I was like, "That's not good." The next year, kind of a little serendipitous thing was, I went with the team. We got to Bartlesville to their stadium, and I'm a few months away from graduation, looking for thinking about jobs, thinking about where I'm going to live after college and what I'm going to do after college. And I remember driving through Bartlesville, and the view from the press box, you got all those trees, and I'm like, man, I could see myself living here. I told my girlfriend, now wife, like, what if we moved to Bartlesville? She goes, I would love it if you got a job in Bartlesville. And the next year, who gets a job in Bartlesville but Evan Fahrbach? I'm like, you stole my life, man. You stole it.
Oh man, yeah, it's a pretty view up there. We got a new press box, but yeah, you look off toward Nowata County, and that's kind of in a weird part of town. Bartlesville High is where you're downtown-ish, but you're near a floodplain, so there's not really a lot around, particularly when you face east from the press box there. There's not really a lot straight east, because most everything that's close to the high school from that direction is really in a floodplain around the Caney River. So it's a kind of unique spot, and Bartlesville's a unique place with Phillips Petroleum and all that stuff. And you hit the nail on the head exactly with the high school stuff. I mean, no one's really transferring to Bartlesville for the most part, right? Like people, athletes who have been good, that have played at Bartlesville High while I've been here, grew up in Bartlesville, and they went to Bartlesville their entire lives and chose to stay here. And certainly, I think the main thing that you and I probably both agree on, and I think anyone who knows anything about high school athletics, you're going to get noticed if you're good enough in Bartlesville, right? Like you don't need to go play at Union or Jinx or wherever. You will be, if you are good enough, you will be noticed. I'll point to our junior basketball kid, David Castillo, who's like the number 8 recruit in the country out of Bartlesville, and has not bothered him one bit. And he, I think, really enjoys getting to play in front of his family, and then growing up here, growing up with these kids. There's something about that's special, rather than just transferring to whatever suburb of wherever you're from. So that's one of the things I like about being here. That's one of the reasons why my position even exists, because there's people in this community that will support media that covers their athletics, unlike other places and other bigger places, just the same as Lawton, right? Lawton has newspapers and radio crews that cover their teams just the same as Bartlesville does. And that kind of small town Americana, but also kind of big enough that you get to compete against the big boys, I always thought is kind of a draw and kind of fun to be here. And certainly I think Bartlesville's had some chances. Yeah, they hadn't been, historically great the last decade or so football wise, but they've had some runs, they've had some dudes, and hopefully with these group of sophomores that are playing right now, they're going to have a chance to go on a run over the next couple of years, and maybe even on Friday starting in Lawton.
Yeah, it's 7 p.m. kickoff Friday night at Cameron Stadium in Lawton, and for all those, especially up in the Tulsa area, Evan, where can they listen to the game?
Yeah, so we'll have it on our AM station here in town, AM 1400, FM translator 93.3, 95.1 in Osage County. But you can also watch a live stream. We have a live stream hooked up with our broadcast. It's on K1TV.com, KWONTV.com. And it'll be myself and a former Bruin coach and some of our college kids running the cameras and stuff. So yeah, we'll have a crew of 3 or 4 people that'll go down there, and excited to get that one on the air for the video and the radio on Friday night.
Very cool. Well, he is Evan Fahrbach. Thanks for joining me, bud. And I guess one last thing, because I've always been interested in this, is somebody who grew up wanting to be a sportscaster and a sports announcer myself. And I believe one of the players, I think you might have retweeted it. I believe one of the Bruin players, posted a clip, clip from over the weekend of their win against Tahlequah, and it included your broadcast. And I was just like, man, at the end of the day, there's a lot more to being a good broadcaster than just a good voice, which, if I do may so say, that you do have, but you also have a good cadence to yourself. If any young broadcast students were listening, what would you say would be your biggest tip, biggest advice for being for a aspiring up and coming kind of play-by-play guy?
Yeah, I would say listen. Just like they say, you should read more to be a good writer. Listen more. Listen when you're watching games on TV. I've always wanted to be a radio guy, so I always listen to the radio whenever I'm watching OSU or the Kansas City Chiefs or Wichita State basketball, or I'm just in the car. I like to listen to those teams guys rather than whatever Yahoo's just been looking at that game for 5 or 6 days, right? Like your teams guys are around those guys all year long, and they're going to have a lot more insight and knowledge and relationships with the people that you care about. And as someone who's kind of a team-centered sports fan, I like to cheer for teams. I'm still a casual sports fan, but I'm more interested in watching, OSU or Kansas City or whatever. I always wanted to try to listen to my team's guys. So just listen a lot, close your eyes and listen to your team's guy or any guy that you think is good, and just try to emulate stuff that you like and pick up on things that they do that you think is cool. And if you listen to, 5, 6, 7 guys, somewhat consistently, maybe that'll all kind of blend together along with your own style. And that's what I've always just tried to do, is just listen, just try to listen to the people that are good, and try to pick up on things that they do that are good.
Yeah. And in football, time, down, and distance, and score.
Time and score, down and distance, yeah, and the yard line position of the ball. We lost a couple of our kind of longer play-by-play people that were underneath me this past year. So we ended up hiring kind of on short notice some younger guys who are actually just out of college, and it makes me feel old because they're like 9-10 years younger than I am. And they were pretty fresh and still are kind of getting into it. And it's like you build a pyramid, right? And right at the bottom of that pyramid, and football play-by-play is time and score, down and distance, yard line position, right?
Yeah.
And you can say who has the ball, where the ball is, what the down and distance is, what the time and score is. All the rest of it, I mean, that tells you what you need to know. So all the rest of it is just kind of it's not just fluff, but all the rest of it, you don't really necessarily need to know what's going on in the ball game. Those things you need. You have to have that bottom rung of the pyramid first, otherwise the rest of it does you no good.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fun to know what formation they're in or whatever, but like that's kind of ancillary at that point, because I've heard certain guys that are like, they're in trips right, and I'm like, is that really going to matter in 3 seconds? Like, tell me where they are. Tell me, are they going to score? And
yeah, that needs to be last. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, for sure.
Well, Evan Fahrbach, appreciate it, man, and safe travels this weekend. And I think it'll be a good one on Friday night.
Yeah, hoping for a good ball game. I think it has a chance to be pretty competitive. So yeah, excited for that. I appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. For SpOKen Freely, I'm Glen Brockenbush. He's Evan Fahrbach. We will talk to you later.